and welcome to another Thursday night episode of Bourbon Bytes. Hopefully you're having a wonderful week. I know a few people have been chatting in the chat, so we want to get a couple shout outs to start out. But before I do, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that has downloaded my new podcast. So if you guys didn't know, I launched a podcast last Friday. We are going on we just hit 100 downloads, which is crazy in a week. I never expected that. So if this is your first time hearing about the podcast, I put a link to it down in the description below on YouTube. I'm also live on Facebook tonight. So if you're on Facebook, feel free to chime in. I can see both comments on both sides. But yeah, on Facebook, you can just go down on my page and find the podcast episodes. New one is dropping tomorrow morning. So make sure you follow me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. It's going to be a really fun, spooky Halloween themed episode. But we have a great stream here tonight. Before we start, I want to shout out, first of all, our newest member, Whiskey Mountains, Adriana. Thank you so much for joining the Byte Club. As you can tell, wearing the Byte Club merch here. Appreciate you so much, Adriana. If you guys are not yet subscribed to Whiskey Mountains, go follow her. She's just incredible. Not just hit 1,000, she hit 1,000 subscribers recently. It's just an amazing channel. I do see some mods here in the house. I see Brandon. How's it going, Brandon? He said, don't forget to mash that like button. Yes, definitely hit the like button while you're here. You got, like I said, got a great show here tonight. I'm so excited to get into these samples and bottles. And we have some special guests too. So Emily Chambers, welcome. She's going to help hold the fort here tonight, as well as Donnie, the Linux Cat, and some patrons here too. I see Zofer. I see Sugar Kitty, who is also a Byte Club member. How are you doing, Sugar Kitty? Whiskey Pear, welcome. I think first time seeing you in the chat, maybe? No, wait, no. I've seen you in the comments, but I don't know if I've seen you in a live stream. If so, good to see you. I think there's a lot more people, but I'm not going to leave them waiting. Let's go ahead and bring on our guests for the evening. First, let me re-welcome to the show our good friend Aaron. So Aaron is our resident Scotch expert and a big Ardbeg fan. So I had to bring him onto the show to experience this with us. So thank you for coming, Aaron.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about this.
Me too. Well, let me go ahead and bring on our featured guest of the evening. Please welcome Ardbeg Cam, the national brand representative of Ardbeg. Cam, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you on. I know we've been trying to work this out over the past few months. I'm glad we finally made it happen, because I've been holding on to these samples and I've been really, really tempted to get into them, but I'm like, nope, I have to resist.
I love it. Well, anything is possible. I'm glad that we could put it together. Let's drink some whiskey.
Yes. So for people in the chat, let us know what your experience with Ardbeg is. I know technically I'm a bourbon channel, but you guys know I dabble in Scotch a bit. So if you guys are new to Ardbeg, let us know if this is your first time hearing about Ardbeg. We'll be happy to go into some of the, more basic stuff. But what we're drinking tonight is some really special stuff. So Ardbeg puts out committee releases every year. The most recent one being Scorch, or the most recent one in the States being Scorch. I've been loving my bottle. I've done a review of it. If you missed it, yes, there we go. Let me feature that for you. Oh, yeah. We're all showing our bottles. Yes, we all got bottles of this one. But so we're going to be talking about that one. We're going to be talking about some older releases that Aaron has kindly shared. And plus, I want to give you guys a chance to ask Cam any questions about Ardbeg that you have always been curious about. So Cam, tell us about yourself and how you got involved with the brand.
Oh my goodness, that is such a long and kind of interesting story. I guess if I could compact it down into a few sentences here. I was politely asked to leave college when I was attending university and needed to find a job, and started washing dishes in a dive bar back here in Seattle, Washington. After years of washing dishes, I found that there were two things at that bar that I absolutely loved. First and foremost, the people. The interaction, the engagement, the energy that you get from being behind a bar all evening and interacting with people. Even though I wasn't making drinks, I was just simply washing dishes. It was those conversations that gave me a lot of energy and a lot of strength to be working until the wee hours of the evening. The second thing was actually whiskey. I found and fell in love with Scotch whiskey quite early on. I think, my upbringing here in the Pacific Northwest, and then also Scotland being the first country that I traveled to internationally when I was about 10 years old, those things kind of coincided and coalesced together to lead me down a path of a peaty path, I should actually say. I almost set it up perfectly there for it. I do have a love of bourbon whiskey. I do have a love whiskeys from around the world. Whiskey is such a beautiful and broad category that when you start distilling down into the different subcategories, you can really find a whole world and universe of possibilities. And I think that single malt Scotch whiskeys offer the widest diaspora of possible distilleries and distillery DNAs as well.
That's awesome.
But I'll get off the soapbox.
No, that's great. It's always great when people have like an intro prepared, because normally they're like, I don't know, I just liked whiskey. So that was really cool. Adriana says she's seen you on Instagram. So yes, that's actually where I found you as well.
Yep. So yeah, I am Ardbeg Cam on Instagram. You know, as the world kind of shut down and went into shelter in place, you know, over 18 months ago, you know, that meant that the role of my job needed to pivot and change from jumping on airplanes and being at whiskey festivals every week to now streaming directly into people's houses. So thank you for offering me the opportunity to get in front of these people and share these delicious whiskeys in such a nouveau fashion.
Absolutely. Well, do we want to start with Scorch since we already kind of teed it up a bit?
Let's go ahead and do it. Absolutely.
So I don't want to put you on the spot about some of these, like if you don't know like what each one is, but what's special about Scorch?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I am a huge, massive fan of Scorch, and I think it's also super intriguing that we're doing a tasting in this fashion as well, because these are all some of the most iconic whiskeys coming from Ardbeg, and there are going to be some pretty cool stories with each whiskey that some might actually just not know. So Scorch is very interesting because it's a return to a style of cask that we've previously used before. Both quite literally in these casks are second fill, but then also in the sense that stylistically, we're not afraid to use heavily charred ex-bourbon barrels because it's been something that we've actually done in the past. If you were to rewind the clock, and again, my math is no good, but 21 minus 10 puts us at 11. So back in 2011, you may be familiar with a previous dram from Ardbeg called Ardbeg Alligator. Aaron, I'm sure you're probably pretty familiar with that one as well.
I'm familiar. I've not had the opportunity to taste that one myself, but I have heard legendary things of that one.
Absolutely. Well, interestingly enough, now you are getting to taste, I guess, the second generation child of Ardbeg Alligator.
Exactly.
Dr. Bill and the whiskey creation team may have my head at sometimes as I speak a little too openly about some of these things. But, once Dr. Bill says it himself, then it's good to go, So when I was over in Scotland a couple of years ago, we were having a conversation about the effects of first fill, second fill, third fill ex-bourbon barrels, and their inherent effects on a spirit profile. Heavily charring an American oak barrel, you're going to expose a whole lot more surface area. And American oak barrels are quite unique because they are high in what you call lignin, as opposed to like European oak, which contain much more tannin. These lignin, when heat treated, they start to degrade into things like oak lactones, things like vanillin. This is why your beloved bourbons taste of vanilla, custard, creme brulee, cinnamon, things like that. So when you're able to render some of those things out into solution into a new made spirit like Ardbeg, things get a little wonky, a little wacky, and kind of weird there. Delicious whiskey on the nose, super spicy. Love it.
Oh yeah.
And the nose is just wonderful on this. Like you said, yes, spicy and like on the palate, like it for me, like it's like those like spice notes and everything, but it's like super desserty at the same time. Like it balances that dessertiness and like intensity. That's just
Brandon's noticing that we're all three using different types of glasses. So Cam, what is your glass called, and why do you prefer to use that one?
Yeah, so this is a wonderful glass called the Professional from Wonders of Whiskey, also on Instagram as well. They do a fantastic job. I love the depth of the bowl of this glass. It means that when I dive my nose into the glass, I'm not going to be experiencing as much olfactory kind of shock because the liquid isn't jammed right up against my nostrils. The other thing that I really like is the bulbous kind of shape, which means that some of the more volatile solutions aren't going to really evacuate this glass. So the whiskey as I know it on my first engagement is going to be the exact same on my second, third, and fourth. Hopefully, you know, for 15 to 20 so odd minutes before you start experiencing a blow off of some of these more volatile esters.
Wow, I would break that day one.
Oh, this is I'm down to 2 of them. Let's not. I'm down to 2. I started with 6. Yeah.
Very cool, man. This is I told my friends, like, this is got me re-excited about Ardbeg. I mean, I hadn't bought a bottle in a while. Again, mostly bourbon, but I think Ardbeg was the Scotch that got me into peated Scotch. So I had one bottle of Ugadal that I was nursing, and I was like, I finished the Ugadal. I'm like, I need a new Ardbeg, and then Scorch came out. I'm like, oh, I need to pick that up. I might try a few at Aaron's house that he has graciously let me try. So I picked it up, and oh my god, it's and I see why it's a lot of people's favorites, because it's got all of that rich ashiness, I would say. But it's toasty too. It's got the toaster sweet, I always say, like, marshmallow kind of aspect to it as well.
Absolutely.
Man, this is delicious.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that marshmallow thing. And Aaron said it as well, that there's a almost like dessert or confectionery like aspect to this whiskey as well. And that really does come from that first fill, or I should say from that second fill, heavily charred ex-bourbon barrel. Both toasted and then heavily charred. You're going to be able to pick out a lot of those things that are identifiable for, you know, even for our bourbon fans as well. The creme brulee, the custard, that marshmallow aspect.
So before the distillate entered the cask for this, was that barrel charred again after or was this basically just refilled from the original charring of the alligator?
I love it. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. No, these casks were not recharred again.
Okay.
They were just refilled from the alligator.
Gotcha. Okay.
What's really unique is that Ardbeg's kind of approach to maturation is very different than our sister distillery of Glenmorangie, which focuses in on finishing. You know, starting something off in ex-bourbon and then moving it to a secondary cask. At Ardbeg, we mature components and then bring those things together. So in the case of something like Ardbeg Scorch, there's first fill, second fill, and third fill ex-bourbon casks that then meet some whiskey that was aged wholly in those refilled, heavily charred American oak casks. Can't call them ex-bourbon casks because they didn't have a previous occupant other than Ardbeg Alligator, which went into them almost 10 so years ago.
Oh, gotcha. I didn't realize that.
So was it was virgin oak then?
Yep.
Oh.
So those were virgin for alligator. It was virgin oak that was heavily charred.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Man, I mean, color wise too. I mean, this is really dark compared to a lot of these other ones. I mean,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no non-chill filtration, and then no colors, no E150A being added to any of the whiskeys at Ardbeg. Those are kind of two of the core heartbeat kind of principles, of the distillery. I would say heavily peated should actually go in there first. So a heavily peated, non-chill filtered, and then no E150A being added to any of our whiskeys either.
Oh, that's fantastic. Our friend Swan over from This Is My Bourbon podcast says, Clifton and Don Nishida took me from a bourbon-only guy to buying Corey Vracken in a matter of months. My wallet hates you, but my palate thanks you.
I love it.
That's kind of what Aaron did to me.
Whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aaron threw me off the deep end. I think the first meetup I went to his house, I tried Octomore. I was like, that was my first time having a peated whiskey. So he really threw me off. But I loved it from day one, and I've sought after it. Ardbeg's the one that I seem to gravitate towards the most. I like the richness, especially like someone mentioned Ugadal in the chat. I love the sherry aspect of that one. That's just like a staple on my shelf.
Absolutely.
But it's also
that next to the 10-year is my favorite whiskey from the core range of Ardbegs. Still Ardbeg 10-year. Because I just am in love with the sense of place and provenance that is the distillery. Whenever I pour myself a glass of that whiskey in particular, I'm immediately teleported to standing right out on the pier at Ardbeg, looking out over at Ireland, 18 so odd miles away, thinking I could swim that, knowing in my heart of hearts, knowing I could not, right? But what I love about each whiskey from Ardbeg pulls at this thread of consistency, where you're not able to put your thumb or your fingerprint directly on it, but you know that you're drinking something from the Ardbeg distillery. Even in Scorch, it shows up, that kind of like linseed oil, almost like pine resin that then meets like lime citrus, a little bit of lemon citrus, and white flour. Those elements are all kind of core to Ardbeg's core style. And they translate even into a whiskey like Scorch.
That's awesome. Aaron, have you been to the Ardbeg distillery?
Oh, I have. I didn't get a chance to do a tour while I was there, but I did go there. I visited and I had lunch in the cafe, which was delicious. One of the best meals I had on Isla, actually. But yeah, no, the distillery is very exciting to go to.
That's all. I want to go there one day. I definitely need to do like a tour of Isla, like you did, Aaron. That sounds like such a fun trip.
100% worth it. Actually, one thing, going back to what you said about the 10 being so just like perfect, essentially, I want to bring up that a while ago, a couple months ago, for Clifton and a few friends of ours, I had put together a blind tasting of Port Ellen distillery, and basically I wanted to put other whiskeys up against it to see if it holds up, as with the legendary status that it has. So I had the Port Ellen, like a 25-year independent bottling. I had some like very old White Horse Lagavulin 16-year. There was Lefroy 25-year. There was Coolila 18. And then I also, just to mess with everybody, I threw in Ardbeg 10. And about half of the people in that tasting, including Clifton, actually picked the Ardbeg 10 as their favorite.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, especially up with such great whiskeys as well there. Everybody on Isla is buzzing.
Yeah, my palate isn't as evolved as a lot of these Scotch drinkers, but I will say, it just was the one that I gravitated towards.
Yeah, no, there's a reason why it's just such like a staple for so many people. Yeah,
it's definitely a good one to get you into it. To me, I skipped that one, went straight to Ugadal, but I haven't actually picked up a tin. I've tried it, but I have not picked up a bottle, so I gotta do that. But shall we move on to the next bottle? Speaking of bottles people can get, let's talk about bottles people can't get. What are we moving to now? Aaron, you were saying we should do you think Ardbeg would be a good one next?
Yeah, that sounds good. That's like one of the more recent ones. Actually, this one I saw that it still is available in some places too.
Okay.
Let me make sure that I grab that bottle off of the back bar here. The Ardbeg.
Oh yeah.
What a delicious.
Now the rest of these. Oh yeah. Let me feature. Hold on. Let me feature you. There we go. So tell us a little bit about this bottle. So from this point on, I have not had any of these other ones. I'm so excited to taste them for the first time with you guys. So tell us about Ardbeg.
We are going to be having a fantastic evening then. If we're one whiskey in and now we get to have six or so that you've never had before. This is going to be a lot of fun. Ardbeg, as it is lovingly called, was a release we put out towards the beginning of the year. It was actually slated for the end of the year in 2020, but as the pandemic did, it had to shuffle things around just a little bit. So we released it towards the beginning of the year here in 2021. This whiskey is in the honor of our former distillery manager, Mickey Heads, the one and only Mickey Heads, who was Ardbeg's distillery manager for 13 years. Again, I never claimed to be somebody who's good at math, but I can count to 13. So if you actually look at the label here, there are 13 characters in the spelling of Ardbeg, one for each year of Mickey's stewardship of the Ardbeg distillery as our distillery manager.
Knowing that would make it a lot easier for me to spell it, because every time I try to spell it, I always leave out an R.
No, same. I won't even try. I won't even try. But interestingly enough, this is classic Ardbeg that meets a style of cask that we have actually not experimented with before, and that's going to be rye. So again, in classic Ardbeg style, it's first, second, and third fill ex-bourbon barrels that then meet some whiskey that was wholly matured in those rye casks, and we bring those components together. I wonder what are some of the flavor profiles and notes that'll jump out of the nose to you for this first time, Clifton. I'm super excited to hear what you've got to say about this whiskey.
Yeah, so I am a rye whiskey fan, so that's really exciting. I think to me I mean, it's still classic Ardbeg. There's no getting around that this is an Ardbeg, but there's I guess I want to say there's like a different kind of earthiness that I didn't get on Scorch. It's more like not I wouldn't say grassy. Grassy is typically what I think of with rye, but it's like I don't know, some kind of like almost sulfurous mulch. That sounds awful, but like it's not in an awful way.
Those are usually the best descriptors for whiskey.
No, I absolutely agreeing with you. It's you know, I used to cut grass in my neighborhood, you know, for money during the summer. So I could, you know, take the metro bus around Seattle and go play basketball and meet up with my friends. And I remember like yesterday that smell of freshly hewn grass that then sits out in the sun, maybe takes on a day or two of rain before it starts to heat back up again. There are elements of that kind of sulfury aspect that start to creep in, pleasant sulfuric compounds that come from maturation, not necessarily from process. The wonderful thing about the production process, not only of Ardbeg, but of single malt Scotch whiskies, is that they have to be distilled in copper pot stills. Copper pot stills and copper in general is a really great substance for catalyzing sulfuric compounds that may come from the malting process, from inherent distillery, from inherent distillery operations as well. So during process, you want to remove as many of these sulfuric or off notes as you possibly can. Great thing is copper is perfectly set to do that. Now, when we're mentioning sulfuric compounds as pleasant, those are ones that are going to start to come into contact from the oak, from maturation. Very, very different. There can be pleasant sulfuric compounds. I just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah. Oh, I just tried it for the first time, and like Donnie the Linux Cat said, he can taste the right influence. Absolutely on the palate. Definitely get it. To me, it's like very bright and forward compared to a lot of these. It's those, and this is where I get. You mentioned the grass. This is definitely where I get the kind of like the fresh cut grass note at the front of the palate. I think it almost like tones down the peat a bit, and I think it's definitely an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like the first time I tried this, I was blown away. Like I don't know what I was expecting necessarily. But like I was just blown away with like how much of like the rye notes were coming through like so strongly.
Yeah, I agree.
Emily asked. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Let's go. I would love to hear Emily. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's saying maybe like a bit of like a mossy grass. Yeah, absolutely.
No, 100%. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, and Donnie says Ardbeg tastes sweeter than Scorch. I agree. That's what I said. Like it's really bright up front. Scorch goes the darker, richer notes, which I love both of those, ends of the spectrum. I mean, that's what's great about, whiskey. There's the sweeter ones, but there's also the dark, rich ones. And I love that I can appreciate both of those.
Yeah. In my mind's eye, any Ardbeg is going to hit, more or less the following kind of flavor profiles. There should be something that's medicinal. There should be something that's a little bit kind of herbaceous as well. There should be something that is, of course, savory, something as well that should lead you kind of in the direction of something a little sweet as well. So those are kind of the flavor profiles that really start to jump out. And don't forget as well, oak or wood influenced as well. So those are the 5 main flavor profiles that are going to be kind of peaked at any different point whenever you're tasting and analyzing a glass of Ardbeg.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a completely different experience than the Scorch. So I love how different they are. So I guess let's keep it moving. I mean, why not, right?
This is the first time I've thought about this as well. These are 2 whiskeys that are almost exactly the same proof, 51.7 and 51.8 for Ardbeg Scorch.
I totally planned that. Just kidding.
Yeah, I did. I was thinking about it and I was like, wait, these are oddly similar in terms of the proof, and had to double check myself there as well. But
so should we move to the one that's 52%?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Drum. That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah,
there we go. No, I mean normally I'm working with such a lot different ranges of proof. So normally I obviously start, low proof, working high proof, but this one's just working itself out that way naturally. So I love it.
Yeah. And something as well is that proof isn't everything. And you see this in whiskeys like like Ugadal. You want to point to
Mhm.
the core range, 54.2% alcohol by volume, but taste like it's lipid and fatty and jammy.
Mhm.
And then you
Oh,
can
yeah.
go to something like, like Ardbeg Wee Beastie, which has a very explosive mouthfeel to it. But
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
47.4, it doesn't have the rotundness, the roundness that
Mhm.
Ugadal does. And even something like Corey Vrecken, which is 57.1, is going to drink much spicier and much more like angular than something like Ugadal. So its proof kind of jumps all over the place and is relative to the previous occupant and stylistically how that previous occupant lends itself.
Absolutely. So with drum, first of all, I love the bottle on this one. I think this one caught my eye the most. Aaron, do you want to show the bottle for drum?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So it has like little stickers of like fruits, and I was like, what's going on with this? This seems so not, yeah. And then that. I'm like, this isn't an Ardbeg. What is this? So what's the story with drum?
Interestingly, I told you that we'd tell some stories that probably most people had not heard. So we'll rewind the clock back to the 1960s and into the 1970s for Ardbeg, early 1960s. Yeah, early to mid 1960s and then early 1970s. I would say the most reoccurring name in Ardbeg's history is Hamish. And in the 1960s, Ardbeg had a distillery manager by the name of Hamish. Hamish actually ended up coming to Ardbeg from DDL, Diamond Distillers Limited in Guyana, which is a rum distillery. So interestingly, the works of something like Ardbeg Drum have been in place much longer than we really even acknowledged. Even as a non-age statement whiskey, it's interesting because some of Ardbeg's expansion that has most recently happened at Ardbeg, some of those things were drawn up and kind of schemed back in the 1960s by Hamish. So, our distillery manager in the 60s and 70s into the early 70s really did help lay the game plan and rubric that we're still following through on now today as well. So Ardbeg Drum was 2019's committee release. Classic Ardbegian structure of those ex-bourbon casks that then meet some whiskey that was aged and matured wholly in some delicious rum casks.
Oh yeah, that's very obvious on the nose. I mean, to me, the first thing I got was molasses. So that's
Yeah.
typical rum kind of note. But man, this just smells so rich. I can already tell that this is gonna be really like viscous in the mouth.
Yeah. What a beautiful nose. Plantains and bananas as well for me in terms of the
Bananas
fruit.
Foster is always the thing that comes to mind with this.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. I haven't revisited this whiskey in months and months and months. This is
Same
a
here.
wonderful nose.
And I'm kind of dwindling on my bottle here.
Yeah.
It's getting to the end, and I'm
Getting
not
to the
happy
end
about that.
there.
Yeah.
I would honestly, I would even say that this might have the most unrecognizable nose of
Mhm.
any Ardbeg that I have really enjoyed. The key indicators of like that wave their hands and say like this is Ardbeg aren't necessarily as upfront, right? In Scorch and in Ardbeg, we had that linseed, we had that white flower, the suggestion of a little bit of citrus as well. The citrus is still here, but it's almost tropified, right? So if I can invent a word there, I'm going to do that. Pineapple, very citric, actually. I used to core out like 50 pineapples a week at one of the bars that I was running for a while, and my hands would just be eaten by the citrus of it. So instead of
wow.
lemon and lime, it's actually now a little bit of pineapple and then
Yeah.
that banana and plantain aspect.
So you mentioned banana, and I know like in the bourbon world, banana tends to lean towards like a fake banana. I always say banana runts candy. This isn't that. This is more of the like the overripe banana. Like you said, bananas Foster. It's got like a banana sugar, but not like fake artificial candy sugar, if that makes sense.
That's great. That is a fantastic tasting note. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There are many whiskey producers here in the States that when I, nose that whiskey, I'm like, that is runts. Like that is runts.
Yeah.
Fake, but there's an over ripened quality to this, and I think that's a really great point out.
And Donnie the Linux Cat's actually drinking along a lot of these with us. So he says, this drum is amazing. It's unlike any Ardbeg I've had. The nose is so different, and the peat is not up front.
Yeah.
But the great thing is, though, the peat is still like on the palate. It's still there. It's just kind of like on the back of that. It's like it's kind of just hanging out. It's letting everything else kind of shine, but still very much present. And the fun thing about this too, because my wife, she likes whiskey. She's not. Peat is not her thing at all. This is the first peated whiskey that like I had her smell it like when I opened it up for the first time, and she just kind of took a step back and was like, oh, and took a little sip of it and just kind of shifted her eyes and was like, can you pour me some of that?
That's awesome.
This was kind of like her gateway into peated whiskey.
I can see why. It's like you said, it's the peat doesn't dominate, but I mean, I think I was right about it being mouthfilling and like very like thick in the mouth. I'm glad I was right about this. Is, man, I think, as much as I love Scorch, this is almost like, I'm like, man, I wish I would have bought that because I saw it, but it was when I was kind of taking a break from peated stuff, and now I'm like, oh man, that's so good. And Aaron, your bottle's almost gone, so I can't ask you for any more. I can't steal anymore.
All right, closing it off.
I saw a comment in the chat. Oh, sorry, what was that?
Well, I was just saying that this is, again, I haven't had this in a little while, and it is drinking really, really well, like really well.
Yeah, it's so good. Cohen says, where is the Ardbeg 20-something? Yeah, I don't have that one.
Yeah,
is that out yet? I've heard of it, but I'm just not familiar enough
with
that.
It's an older release.
Yeah, we've got it was a series of 3 of them, 21, 22, and 23. Now that series of Ardbeg 20-somethings has actually been replaced by Ardbeg 25-year, which is a release that happens once a year. Hyper limited whiskey, as the distillery just doesn't have a lot of stock sitting around from 25 years ago. If you go back 25 years, 1996, the distillery technically still would have been closed. We reopened the distillery and rebooted the distillery in 1997. So from 91 until 96 were closure years with some years of light sporadic distillation. Same thing to be said from 1981 until 1989 as well. So the fact that some of that whiskey even exists is ludicrous as well.
Fred asks, are they Jamaican rum casks?
That I cannot answer.
Okay.
I have asked that question a few times, and I remember I said as soon as Dr. Bill says it, we can start saying it. Dr. Bill has never given us a direct answer as to where he sourced those rum casks. I will say that if anybody understands the relationship between oak and new made spirit, it is Dr. Bill, World Whiskey Distiller of the Year, numerous times. The only person to ever win that award more than twice from the International Whiskey Competition. Wow. He is a absolute nut about oak extractives, and ensures that both Glenmorangie and Ardbeg receive the highest quality casks that we possibly can. So what I can tell you about those ex rum casks is that they were nowhere near to neutral. Think of an oak barrel the same way that you do a tea bag. The more you use it, the less extractives are still remaining in solution or in the cellulose, right? So what I can say about those is that those casks were nowhere near to their 5th or 6th utilization. Yeah. They still had quite a bit of tread on them, and that's something that we can actually even see. Clifton, you pointed it out, in yourself, was the mouthfeel, the texture of this whiskey. That's a huge giveaway.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, I've had like other rum matured or rum finished scotches, and like the rum like will kind of like come through like maybe a little bit. Like it definitely adds like some character to the spirit, but just like this, the way I like dramatically like influences it, it's like it's very prominent on the palate with this. That's the cool thing too. Like with like all of these releases, like they're all so drastically different. Like Ardbeg comes out with like a lot of releases like every year, feels like, but like every one of them is so radically different. It feels like.
Absolutely. And I think that is due in part and parcel to the approach that Dr. Bill has employed in terms of maturation, right? Ardbeg's new made spirit and even Ardbeg, after 8 months, after 8 years. Think of it kind of like a cruise ship, right? Where it's very difficult to turn that massive boat, to one direction or to another. Whereas a whiskey like Glenmorangie is a little bit more like a cigar boat or a speedboat, which can be turned on a dime just a little bit easier. Dr. Bill quite literally has to screw off one head and put on another one in terms of when he's approaching whiskey creation for both of the two brands. At Ardbeg, he works in components that are aged separately and then brought together. But at Glenmorangie, it's all about the art of finishing.
Cohen mentions that Dr. Bill is doing a live stream next week with Total Wine on Glenmorangie. Oh, very cool.
Yes, he is. Very excited to be on that.
I'll have to tune into that for sure. What day and time is that?
Let me pull that up real quick. Gosh, with the burning questions here.
You're good. Hey, actually, that's great timing because I was going to say we're about halfway through. Independent Joe's throwing out links. So, yes, if you guys haven't yet checked out the podcast, like I said, just launched it last week. The 3rd episode is going up tomorrow morning. So make sure you are subscribed to get that for your Friday commute for the Halloween episode. And thank you again to everyone that's already followed that. It's available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Link down below. Did that give you enough time to find it?
Yes, it did. Yes, Perfect. It did. Like clockwork. I love it. So Dr. Bill will be doing his virtual training on November 3rd at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time.
6:30 Eastern. Got it. Awesome. Very cool. I will definitely try to make that, at least listen in while I'm at work because it's a little early for me. Okay, well, I guess we're ready to move on. Aaron, what do you think? What should we go to next?
Do you want to do the Supernova before we get into the wine and sherry stuff?
I was gonna say, what's the best one to save for the very end? That's the thing. What's the biggest surprise?
I mean,
Dark Cove.
Dark Cove is my personal favorite.
Okay, we'll save Dark Cove for the end. Okay, well, you want to do? You said Supernova.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Supernova though is definitely far from my least favorite. That's for sure.
So, Cam, can you show us the bottle for Supernova so we can take a look at that?
Absolutely, of course. So this is the batch of Supernova from 2019.
Yes, I love that label. That's so cool. So now Supernova's been around a while, right?
Yes, it's more so than an individual whiskey. It's actually an experiment. So this would be 2015, I believe. This would be the Supernova from 2015. So more so than a whiskey, it's actually an experiment. Dr. Bill and the whiskey creation team once a year will attempt to make a whiskey that is that displays more characteristics of the peat than even our classic Ardbeg 10 years old. To achieve this, we will actually have orders for malted barley be facilitated by another malting facility other than Port Ellen. So Port Ellen Maltings actually is responsible for about 85 to 90% of Ardbeg's contract malted barley. But Port Ellen, which is actually where Colin Gordon, our new distillery manager, came from, he was the site manager there and then also over at Lagavulin as well. So I remember speaking to Colin a few years ago. It had to be about 3 years ago before he came over. About the highest ppm or parts per million in terms of like phenolic composition of the batches of malted barley coming from Port Ellen. So at Ardbeg, our malted barley comes in from Port Ellen at 55 to 65 parts per million. We will take higher. We will not take any batches lower than that. The highest that Colin has told me that he has been able to achieve at Port Ellen Maltings in terms of the phenolic parts per million is actually about 100 to 105. There are other malting facilities in Scotland that are able to achieve a higher parts per million due to different operational styles, right? So we will have some malted barley come to us from another malting facility. What I would say is that malted barley won't always display the characteristics or the range of phenols that you find active in malted barley coming from Islay, because the peat is genetically different, very, very different. Mm-hmm. For instance, like in the Highlands up in Inverness or even over in Aberdeenshire, the peat is actually less phenolically laden. whereas places like Isla and Jura, as well as up on Orkney as well, have peat that is much more heavily phenolically laden, right? But it is the malting facilities operational styles that allows them to, I guess, recognize or realize a higher range of these phenols. So we'll take some of that malted barley and we'll blend it together with classic Ardbegian malted barley and basically see what happens. Dr. Bill is in love with this project, and it's not something that always results and ends in us receiving a Supernova bottling, but the project is done every single year, so that's pretty interesting to keep in mind.
Wow. So that's Aaron. You had a sip of it. What do you think about this one?
I mean, it's super heavily peated Ardbeg. I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's why I say, like, flavor wise, like it's typical Ardbeg, but like you said, the peat's amped up. It's like it's like when you have like an IPA, but you go to like a double or a triple IPA. Like it's kind of like that level. It's just the peatiness is amped up.
Yeah.
I would say it's. I mean, I don't know. I'll say I'll have to try the other ones. I'm like saying, to me, this is a little too peat forward. It's not my favorite personally. But I think it's a cool experiment, and I know, Aaron, you're more into stuff like this.
Oh yeah, and I'm loving it. I love like that. Taking a sip, you get the hit of peat, and then all of a sudden you get, after on the finish, it just comes back even stronger. You kind of like feeling your nostrils a bit. It's like a big vanilla bomb. There's like a certain sweetness to it too. Like that's just.
Yeah.
Really
I was gonna say, second sip, I picked up a lot more sweetness, and I'm enjoying. The first sip, I think, just caught me off guard. I was like, oh wow, this doesn't remind me of Ardbeg. But second sip, like you said, the vanilla, there's a lot more sweetness on it, so I can handle it after the second sip. I just needed 2 sips.
Yeah.
You know what I find pretty interesting about the 2019 batch is that we went 2014, 2015, both got batches of Supernova, none in 2016, none in 2017. But from what I've heard from the whiskey creation team, is that 2017's batch came really, really close to being bottled. So much so that those whiskeys were actually repurposed for the 2019 batch of Supernova.
Oh, wow.
What's intriguing about that is that phenols have you can call it a shelf or a half-life, where after 10 to 12 years, phenolic compounds start to become drastically less active. Some of them will literally evacuate solution as well. So, a whiskey that may have been peated to a level of far past 55 to 65 parts per million will lose some of the phenolic activity while it's resting and while it's maturing in cask. This is why, we bottle a whiskey like Ardbeg Wee Beastie from the core range. This is why we bottle that whiskey intentionally young at 5 years. It's so that all of those phenols are hyperactive and kind of pent up, right? Have a lot of energy and moving with purpose. With a whiskey like Supernova 2019, this whiskey theoretically should not express itself as heavily phenoled or peated as it actually does.
I mean, that's like one of those really like interesting things too with you see like with Octomore, who also does like the super heavily peated over at Bruichladdich, like they have like the release of, like the 10-year, which every now and then, which that like the peat level on that is just like so like it's barely there compared to some of like their younger releases, like the 10.4, which is a 3-year virgin oak, and that thing, it just blows you away.
Absolutely. We're huge fans of our good friends over at Bruichladdich as well. Absolutely massive fans of their Octomore series. Great whiskeys. Absolutely great whiskeys. I'll say the Bruichladdich is hands down the best gin distillery on Isla.
Oh yeah, we actually have their gin. Yeah, like the botanist, right?
Yeah.
My husband's a big gin guy, so
Love it.
Jason from Mash and Drum says Ardbeg baby. If you guys missed Jason's stream earlier, he was live with Rarebird 101, talking about Wild Turkey 1, their new release. So go check out his stream if you missed it. And he says Dark Cove for the one. Yeah, we're saving Dark Cove for the very end, Jason. So stick around.
Nice. Huge fan of the Wild Turkey Distillery. Huge fan of them over there. Oh,
yeah,
great.
I can't wait to get the new. I haven't gotten Russell's 13 yet. I have not seen it anywhere in Southern California. and I have not gotten the new one, like the Master's Keep one, but I've got my eyes peeled.
You know, it's so interesting. The whiskey world is so small. What I will say is that our friends over at Wild Turkey are the reason that I don't necessarily like hoard bottles. I open most everything that I purchase. I'll never forget being at Wild Turkey and having a conversation with Jimmy. And you know, him giving me it should be up here somewhere. It's in my back corner there. Is Wild Turkey Diamond. And getting a bottle of Wild Turkey Diamond from Jimmy Russell, having it signed. Then the next year, I remember going back and telling him like, "Hey, I still have that bottle of whiskey you gave me." And he looks me in the eyes and he's like, "Cam, that's stupid. I gave it to you for you to drink it." And that for me was like something that, you know, as a young bartender and now somebody who you know speaks about whiskey every single day. That is one of the most important learning experiences of my life, because it teaches us that the value of these whiskeys isn't to be, you know, hoarded for one's own self, that they're meant to be shared with one another. So cheers and slanjava to that.
I would say cheers to that.
Yeah.
I'm pouring some of the black into my glass, or the Blaaack into my glass now. So I'll wait to cheers you with that one. So Aaron's got the bottle. Let me feature you 1 second. All right, so this one has the sheep on it. You may, or is it a ram? Is it a sheep? What is this?
Yeah.
Or I guess it does the same thing.
Yeah. And then I'll hold up my general release as well.
Okay, yeah, let me show.
So
actually, if you could, I just missed that. Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah.
There you go. Oh, so that one doesn't have the actual sheep.
Yeah. So what's really interesting about the Ardbeg Committee series is that the ones that are released for Ardbeg Day will be released with a white label. Those Ardbegs are the Ardbeg Day Committee bottlings. Then there's the Ardbeg Day General Release, which will have the classic black label to it.
Gotcha.
You'll see this with like Ardbeg Scorch has a version with a black label. Drum has a version with a black label. You know, Dark Cove does as well, and so did Alligator. So those are Ardbeg Day bottlings, but for the general release. The committee bottlings are generally a bit higher in proof, and the exact same whiskeys, but only bottled at a slightly higher proof than the general releases.
Yeah, this
so
was actually
Ardbeg,
the lowest of the bunch. It's 50.7%.
Yep.
Oh,
and so mine should be at 46. Yeah, 46 flat.
So what's the story with this one? What is it? Is it finished? I would assume, or I guess finished. I always use finished. That's a bourbon word. I apologize.
No,
Asian.
You're absolutely right that I would say finish isn't a bourbon word, because bourbons really just jumped on board with finishing. You look at the category of bourbon. This is where the bourbon world is going to turn on me here as well. I can predict it. So the world and the universe of bourbon has historically been more of an iron fist in a velvet glove, right? Where it's constricted, because of the nature of these distilleries having to you know mature or at least see through maturation in virgin oak. Now distilleries have found loopholes by saying bourbon finished in X type of whiskey, whereas categories like single malt Scotch whiskey, blended malt whiskey, single grain whiskey, you know, Japanese single malts, Taiwanese single malts, Irish whiskey, they can feel free to utilize cask at will. The reason that we denote that they're finished, or that there's a secondary component or an ancillary component, is to specify why this whiskey is different than every other whiskey coming from the distillery. So even though it's not a finished whiskey, there is a component that was matured wholly in Pinot Noir casks.
Yeah, First Fill Whiskey coming in. By the way, another awesome channel. Go check out First Fill Whiskey. Yeah, so interesting. So New Zealand Pinot casks?
Yes, yep, New Zealand
Very
Pinot
cool.
Noir cask. If you were to fly, you know, as the crow flies, the farthest place away on the planet from Islay is actually New Zealand. And interestingly enough, It is one of they are kind of sister islands, I would actually call them, where on both islands you'll actually be outnumbered 3-1 in terms of sheep to people, which is pretty interesting and kind of a funny story as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh wow! I just had my first sip of this one.
Mhm.
This is giving me oogie vibes. So I like it has a lot of that wine influence on it for sure. Ooh.
Yeah.
Man.
That's delicious. Yeah, that wine influence is absolutely there. The mouthfeel, the texture of it, cherry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cherry's a great one. I was thinking it's like cherry, but it's like, to me it's like cherry pie filling. Like it's got the sweetness of the pear. It's not like necessarily like a fresh cherry, but it's like the cooked, really reduced cherry. I like that.
I agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Really delicious sweetness to it. There's still a little bit of that classic Ardbeg citrus and the hints or suggestions of like flowering lily as well, like white flowers.
He says it's true. We have a lot of sheep. He's agreeing with you.
I will say not as many as Jura.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's there. Well, I should say on Jura and on Isla, it's sheep. On Jura, it's actually deer. The neighboring island to Isla. It's very funny. It's a 15-20 minute ferry ride over to Jura, and you get there. You think that Isla is tiny. It has 3,200 so odd people that live on the island. Jura has 300. So few that the kids from Jura actually take the ferry over to Isla to go to school in the morning as well.
Wow.
It's such a beautiful relationship between those two islands as well.
Swan, our friend in Kentucky, says he's outnumbered in Kentucky 2.2 bourbon barrels per person. Where can I sign up for my barrel?
Yeah, exactly. Good problems to have.
Oh man, that's again, it's very different. We said early on, I think Aaron, you may have been the one that said it, like you love that these are all so different.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. This is a completely different direction than the Scorch, than the the rye cask. Which one was that one? That was the Ardbeg.
Ardbeg.
Yeah. So this is a completely different direction, but I love it just as much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
I added a little bit of water to it.
Yeah, I'll do the same.
And like
droplet.
The almond aspects and kind of like dry and like bitter almond really started to amplify for me.
Now, what was the proof, Aaron, on the one that you have?
50.7.
Okay, I don't know if I got the sample from you. This actually came from my friend. I think this one came from Brian Brennicky, who I haven't seen him in the chat today. So it is the committee release, so I assume it's probably the same. Yeah, I just added a little bit of water just to see what happens.
Yeah, water is Scotch whiskey's friend. Sometimes it's Scotch whiskey's friend. Each dram is definitely different. But it is one way or another. It is 25% of the recipe. Malted barley. You're gonna have your yeast. You're gonna have your water as well, and then of course the oak barrels as well. Those are essentially the 4 ingredients. Yeah.
I can see why you said it was more almond. To me, it definitely lightened it up. It got rid of some of the darker oak that I was getting on the other one. Yeah. And to me, it's more of a brighter, so I could see nuttiness coming from that as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely, I actually think that, not to say it benefits from the water, because I love trying things at the natural proof, but it changes it up if you want to maybe start out with the lower proof and then work your way to, doing it completely neat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite interesting. Like the Dr. Bill and the whiskey creation team will taste whiskeys from cask strength and then add water all the way down until they get to about 20 to 25, far past bottling proof, because they're looking for inherent flaws in any distillate, and in any whiskey that they've put together. So water and whiskey are there's a beautiful relationship there that should be explored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For sure. Well, speaking of exploring, I'm so excited for our last pour here. This is Ardbeg Dark Cove Committee Release. Who's got the bottles? All right, you got the bottles. There we go.
And I guess I'll hold up my general as well afterwards.
Yeah, so that's the committee release, and then let's see the general release that Cam has. There we go. Ooh, that bottle, the bottle's so dark. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
relevant to the name, but so dark Cove. I know nothing about this other than Aaron was very stingy. I'm just kidding, he wasn't stingy. Your bottle's getting his bottle's getting very low, so he was very.
It's not super low, but it's getting there.
It's okay. I know it's your favorite. You're good.
And to be fair, also, I have given you a sample of this before.
Yeah. Let's not end any friendships over here.
I'm going over to his house. I'm going over to his house on Saturday, so I might if I love this, I might have to sneak into the Ardbeg cabinet.
Well, to be fair, Clifton, I know you don't remember, but I did already give you a sample of this one, and we did taste it together on stream.
Was that the one where we did the tour of Isla?
Yeah.
We did, okay. So yeah, Aaron and I, if you guys are watching, you missed that stream. He gave me a bunch of different Isla that I had never had before, and we tried. Man, we had like 10 that night. I feel like
we tried every distillery on Isla.
Yeah, we did every distillery on Isla. So you blame me for forgetting this one. Okay, Dark Cove. What's the story with this one?
So the history of Ardbeg goes back to 1815. If you look at most of the bottles, they will have the ESTD, established 1815 date somewhere on the bottle. That's the date that legally we started making and distilling whiskey. You'll notice that shockingly, most of the distilleries on Isla actually have a founding or established date of either 1814, 1815, because that's when the first exciseman actually started and was placed on Isla, which Isla had a robust history of illegal and illicit distillation. Ardbeg being one of the distilleries that was actually born out of this illicit distillation kind of past that Isla has had. So we know that there was illegal and illicit distillation happening around Arnhem Based, which is the home of the beast. That's the name of the farm that Ardbeg still to this day sits on. So even back in the 1790s, there would have been illegal and illicit distillation happening at this farm. And you have to ask the questions, well, why at this specific place would they have started making whiskey? And the answers are really quite simple once you think about it. Well, first and foremost, it's a farm. So you would have had access to your raw ingredient, your barley, which would have then been malted on site at the farm itself. Then you would have obviously had a water source that actually gravity feeds directly down to the distillery. This is why Ardbeg still sits at the exact same place. That water source is Loch Ugadal, the dark, mysterious place. Quite literally, gravity feeds right down to the foot of the distillery, so we don't have to work for our water. But then, arguably most important, you would have actually been able to distill this whiskey under cover of darkness. So in front of the Ardbeg distillery sits a cove. Many of the distilleries on Isla are actually built right on the shoreline because historically, we haven't been able to fly for all that long. And still, getting on the Isla and trying to fly bowls of malted barley or tons of malted barley, that's not happening. So still a lot of things are delivered by sea on Isla. So historically, a lot of these distilleries were built directly on the seashore. This is why a lot of them are white in color within the large name displayed in black letter type, right? So as you see Ardbeg, white buildings, ARDBEG on the building closest to the seashore. So as you enter the sea, this dark cove, under cover of darkness, it would have been very, very difficult to sneak up on any of these illegal or illicit distillers that would have been distilling on Arnhem Based. It would have been very difficult to ambush them from the sea because a lot of the rocks that are actually out in this cove are very, very dark, pointy, and jagged. You can actually see the deer from Jura actually resting on these rocks as well during the daytime. It's quite interesting. But that would have actually made for a natural kind of deterrent that would have warded off any excisemen that maybe was trying to ambush an illicit distiller there. So hence the legend of the Dark Cove was born and actually benefited the Ardbeg distillery as it's been able to maintain that place on Isla at Arnhem Based since 1815 and a little beyond.
Wow, that's such a cool story. So I just want to, before I miss it, acknowledge Super Chat. Firstville Whiskey from New Zealand, $10, or I guess they use dollars in New Zealand. This is a great discussion. Really enjoying it. Cheers. Well, cheers to you, my friend. And Brandon dropped the link to that trip around Isla. So you guys go check that out after this stream. And then Whiskey Mountain says the trailer that Aaron edited for the Isla tour was so good. Yes, Aaron, that was awesome. Thank you for letting me use it for that stream.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Dark Cove. So in terms of the casks that were used for this, what are we dealing with here?
Yeah. So again, first, second, and third fill ex-bourbon barrels make up the heartbeat of the whiskey. The ancillary or secondary casks that are going to be utilized are whiskey that is wholly matured in black sherry casks. Black sherry is essentially a filler sherry. It's generally used for coloration for things like Pedro Jimenez and whatnot as well as some like lighter Olorosos can benefit from having some of this blackened sherry teaspooned into it. So the idea is to make one of the darkest and most mysterious Ardbegs of all time. We absolutely succeeded in that. Marrying those things together has brought us this fruity, decadent, robust, and kind of sticky toffee-laden style of whiskey that is absolutely one of my favorites and has been a fan favorite of the Ardbeg Committee members for the last almost 6 years. Yeah,
I was gonna say I was just gonna drink a little bit, but I had one sip of it, and I just had to finish this because oh my god, I see why Aaron is crazy about this one.
I mean, to me, this is just like my cozy whiskey. Like this is like just the sherry and peat. Like this is like what I think of like when I think of those two combined. It's just like my perfect like rainy day, have the fireplace on, just like lounging with this. This is just perfect. Like
absolutely.
Yeah,
like that's those are my tasting notes on this. It's just
just perfect.
That's valid. You know, like whiskey shouldn't only be about the way that it smells or it tastes or the way that it feels, but like how it makes you feel as well as equally.
I mean, that's the thing is like I wouldn't necessarily say this is the most complex Ardbeg I've had. Like even like tonight, but just like this just like puts me in such like a happy place. Like whenever
well, it lingers too. Like it's, I feel like it's still sitting on my tongue.
Yeah.
Like I mean, going with the fireplace metaphor, it's like a cat is like curled up in your lap while you're like it's just sitting on your tongue. Like I don't know where I was going with that, but
yeah,
you get the point.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. I mean, Aaron, you know my favorite thing with peated scotches is if there's a lot of sherry influence on it, it's right up my alley, and I see why you thought I would like this because oh my god, that's so good. Now I imagine people can't get this basically at this point.
No, this is this is long gone. I can't even find bottles of this. I'll send frantic text messages or emails back to the team in Scotland, and every once in a while I get the answer that is like, "Are you serious?" And this is one that if I sent that email asking if I could have any of the the Ardbeg Dark Cove that's left, they would say, "Are you serious right now?" No, we don't have any more left.
Well, but it sounds like it's the favorite by a lot of people. So is there a chance that there might be a comeback at some point in the future?
I cannot
heard any rumblings
for Dr. Bill. I've heard of some wild experiments from Ardbeg coming down the pipeline. At any given time, I'm told that Dr. Bill has between 7 to 13 or so experiments with Ardbeg that are ready to rock and roll. So we should see a very exciting next few years for Ardbeg. But as far as Dark Cove, getting access to those black sherry casks, I would imagine is not easily done. And with the size and the amount and the quantity of casks that we would need to attempt something like this again, because we're a significantly larger brand than we were in 2015, 2016. I think it would be a little unrealistic, but never say never is something that I'm also fond of saying.
So there's a glimmer of hope for us all.
Exactly.
Donnie, I saw Donnie's message earlier. He says he enjoyed all of his supports tonight. He said, thank Aaron and Cam for being with us. Yes, thank y'all so much for this. Cam, so where can people find you on the web? You said, are you going to be on that tasting with Total Wine as well?
I will be spectating. I will be watching.
Okay.
As
gotcha.
I have the distinct pleasure of working with Dan Crowell, who is the National Glenmorangie Ambassador. He is, one of my best friends on the planet and somebody that I'm absolutely privileged to travel the country with on a weekly basis. You can find him at Glenmo Dan on Instagram. He, I believe, will be part of the live stream with Total Wine and Dr. Bill. David Blackmore, who is the global ambassador for Glenmorangie Company, I'm sure will also be a part of that. I hate David Blackmore. Just kidding. No, he's also one of my good friends as well. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for him, to this day as well. But on social media, you can find me at Ardbeg Cam and then Cameron George on Facebook. If anybody ever wants to email me, my email is cameron.george@ardbegusa.com, and I'll throw that in the chat as we close up as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cam. And Aaron, thank you for joining us. I know you got excited about this stream, so I'm glad to have you on and be a part of it. Well, everyone watching, like I said, thank y'all so much. Stay tuned for the podcast that's coming out tomorrow morning. But until next time, this has been Bourbon Bytes Whiskey Reviews with the Gaming Twist. I'm Clifton. Cheers, and I'll see you next Thursday. Have a good one. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.